that. So we thought a lot about how to bring about, in the title, this complicated history. And of course, it's very, very hard. But the lily is meant to symbolize the French fleur-de-lis. So at this time, the French symbol is the royal symbol. This is pre-revolutionary France, so it's not the blue, white, and red flag. It is the lily flower. That is a symbol of the kings of France. So when these some of these men, when they go into battle for the Mughals or for the Marathas, they carry the banner of the fleur-de-lis, of the lily flower. So that is the lily. The lion is to convey the sense of the Indian parties. Many of them use the lion. So the Mughals use a rampant lion as well as the setting sun. The Awadh, the Nawab of Awadh, who are Shias, it is of course a symbol of Imam Ali because he was called the Lion of God. So for them also the lion is very powerful. And of course for Tipu Sultan because he does have a walk-on role in my book. And Sher in India is lion or tiger. So even for Tipu Sultan it is relevant. So lion and the lily.
Thank you so much for that. That's so enlightening.
Thank you.
So I recently came across the Oxford Handbook of Indian History.
Okay.
And there is no chapter on Muslims or Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are 9 mentions of the word Islam and 5 Muslim
Okay.
in the entire history. So I just want to kind of contextualize the book because what you're doing is extremely important. And in terms of the political context in which different histories are being written, where this is completely being erased in a very alarming way. So I just want to get a sense from you as a historian.
Yeah.
What is your sense of writing in this period?
So, you're absolutely right about the British point of view. In fact, when they were leaving India in 1747 and when they left all their colonies one after the other at that point, they implemented something called Operation Legacy, which was to destroy all the incriminating documents and manuscripts that were left behind in these countries so that nothing would be left to show the British in a bad light, so that people would remember them with affection and respect are the terms they use. And this is something, it's not only in 1947, they do it throughout the time they are here. It's something that I show in the book, that's something that I discovered. They destroy evidence whenever it doesn't suit them. They're very clever about curating evidence, about leaving the impression and the evidence that they wish to be remembered by. And they have in their records constantly this anxiety that what they are doing really is deposing one Muslim king after the other, right? You have Tipu Sultan, you have Murshidabad, you have Awadh, you have the Mughal emperor. They know that it's these great Muslim monarchs, great Muslim rulers in all these areas that they are usurping, that they are traders who are doing something that is completely unlawful. So they are very angst-ridden vis-a-vis the Muslim encounter. And wherever possible, they either destroy. We know how much Delhi was destroyed because of being a center of uprising. Lucknow was completely destroyed because it was a center of uprising. And they rewrite the narrative, and we have inherited a lot of that narrative just because of the way in which, the freedom came about, the way in which histories were written after that. So we also have an amnesia when it comes to what was actually happening on the ground. And so for me as a writer of narrative history, I don't want to just be saying the same things over and over again. I really want to challenge what we were told using other sources if I can. And in this case, there are Indian sources, of course, but there are also the French who are writing something quite different. Now, it's not to say we can take them at their word. They were also colonists, and they have their own motivations, but we can overlay them with what the British were saying and get a fairer idea of what was happening. And I think the fact that these cultures that came up at this time were quite far removed from purely religious. They were much more about, music and dance or what you ate or, those kind of things. And I think really, especially in our fraught times, it's interesting to remember that.
Just to add a little bit to what Ira just said, and to your question, I mean, in that period post 1707 after Aurangzeb, it was not just the emerging colonial powers. Actually, amongst the Muslims, there were three distinct camps. So there was the Persian camp, the Turki camp, and the ethnic Indian Muslim camp. In fact, they were constantly jostling. And Shujaatullah literally relocated to Lucknow when the Turki camp gained ascendancy, which later on went and established the Asafjai dynasty in Hyderabad. So they were Turkis. And the other guys were Persians. And then the Sayyid brothers, who were kingmakers, are actually Indian Muslims. So, this play was also going on simultaneously.
Operation Legacy, there's an interesting book now called The History Thieves.
The History Thieves, yes, I haven't read it yet. Yeah, I think that slowly there is a bit of a reckoning, even in Britain, that we need to re-examine this sort of history, this period in history.
What you said in these presentations, there's a lot of peaceful situations, right? Were there wars, things like that at that time? Were there a lot of skirmishes?
Whereabouts, sorry?
In ours, for instance, I mean, whatever you gave us by way of a picture is quite a lot of peaceful scene, depictions,
Yes, I mean, considering these were very volatile times,
Yeah.
I think I was surprised to see that there was more culture happening than I would have expected. Once Shujaatullah comes back in 1765 to found his capital and stays away from what's happening at Delhi, he turns away from active warfare completely. He just monitors his borders. He is fighting with the Rohillas to get their lands if he can. So, but these are minor battles, relatively speaking. It is really in the late 18th century, once the British really start bringing in more power and more forces, that it becomes unavoidable, that battle becomes unavoidable. But until then, there is, of course, a lot of posturing, as Paul has pointed out, between various groups, who are trying to in their own way. But this was a large area. Everybody had, more or less their own fiefdoms and were pretty much invested and interested in spending their resources locally to create things other than just war. And which is why we have some great schools of music and dance that come up. And some of them are wiped out when the British say you need to cut down your household expenditure, for example. What is household expenditure? It's not like what we imagine household expenditure to be. It is the hundreds of people that were employed, the courtesans that were employed, the rakabdars and bawarchis who are in your kitchens, the hundreds and hundreds of craftspeople who are making your clothes. So when you are told by the British, you're imposed a limit to your household expenditure, it meant that certain schools of art were wiped out overnight. So we are sometimes left with nothing of what was happening in the 18th century. So it is a difficult time to piece together in a very accurate manner because of the missing or misleading evidence.
I was wondering if the French, who were looking for jobs, like you said, also didn't carry their men with them. The fighting men, for instance. They were
They were in fact in Awadh, when he takes on these men that Gentil brings to him, there are 300 men who come to fight. Not all of them are trained soldiers. In fact, a visitor who passes through, a Frenchman called the Count of Moudave, who writes very interesting memoir at this time, he says that they were terribly trained and most of them were not actually soldiers. There was even a cook who was passing himself off as a... So what I want to know is how did that cook influence Lucknowi food? But that's a topic for a different book altogether. But there were French citizens, yes, very much present, and not just in Awadh, all over the place because of the smashing up of their factory, their trade factories. So they were actually present as adventurers. Some of them were just looking to make money. Some were soldiers. But yes, we do have many. I do speak about quite a few of them.
Also, it's the French over-invested
that is a fact. So all these huge events of the 18th century all have knock-on effects on each other, because the French are broke as well at the end of the American War of Independence. So it exacerbated, there were already many conditions on the ground that made people very unhappy, but definitely this exacerbated and turbocharged the whole sequence of events that led to the French Revolution. But what's also very important, I find, as the result of the American War of Independence, is that a lot of the British officers who fought there were then sent to India. And they came with a certain mentality like Cornwallis. So he loathed the settlers, because the people who rose up against Britain in America were originally British and Europeans who settled in America, right? And then they rose up and turned against the mother country. So he really hated the Anglo-Indians, and he brought in laws that made it impossible for Anglo-Indians to rise in the East India Company. He brought in really repressive laws against the Anglo-Indians in particular. So it's interesting to see how not just at a global level, but at a human level, this big war of American independence really had an effect. And then they were determined, like I was saying, to hold on to it. Now they became like absolutely 100% determined and motivated to never lose India, whatever happened. And the French were equally motivated to try and do something to destabilize them. But the British sent forces in ever increasing number after the loss of America.
And then especially after the losing the Chosen White.
Oh yes. Then there were separate enclaves altogether after 1857.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you. Your book doesn't go up to
No. So it, yeah,
18th century.
yeah, 18th century.
But if you could just tell us what you know is what happened to Awadh then, because Awadh was a center and it decimates and other little kingdoms.
So my book more or less stops at 1803, which is the Battle of Delhi. So which is the time when the British finally take over the person of poor Shah Alam, whom we have followed to a little extent. So from that time onwards, it is they who control the Mughal emperor. They are the ones who now finally control the most powerful symbol of Indianness, let us say. But Lucknow continues. So Lucknow at this time, it is Saadat Ali Khan who comes to the throne. And a very unfortunate thing happens when Asaf-ud-Daula dies. He has an adopted son, Wazir Ali. Now Asaf-ud-Daula himself is homosexual. And it is well known and accepted in Lucknow, even in the records. But he has adopted a son, as is very common, as we know amongst Indian rulers, is to take a child. If you don't have a child of your own, you adopt a child. So Wazir Ali is his adopted son and heir. He has made him his heir very early on in his reign. Everybody knows this. But he shows a mind of his own. He begins to create a lot of trouble for the British. So they come into Lucknow. Bahu Begum also comes into Begum to try and settle this process, because her son has just died. She wants to stabilize the kingdom. And for almost, I think, over a year, she stays in Lucknow and has her parallel court where she is ruling Awadh, along with her Khwaja Sara, who is someone we have not talked about today, are the royal eunuchs. They are very powerful at this time. The two of them rule Awadh, along with Wazir Ali. But Wazir Ali he's a very young man, so he wants to do things his own way. To cut a very long story short, but it's a very interesting episode which I talk about. The British come and throw over Wazir Ali and bring Saadat Ali Khan, who has all this time been living in Calcutta pretty much as an Englishman in training himself. So things become very dire because he is forced to sign a new treaty because they have brought him in, so he owes them everything. He is forced to sign a treaty where he hands over all sovereignty to the British. He has very little power left. So from around the early 19th century, power is very difficult, but they continue investing in the culture. So this Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, in fact, it has a great sort of flowering at this point. It's not a place where nothing is happening, where people are, dispossessed in any way. They are rich. They are, there's a lot of money coming in. They are spending it on the arts, in all kinds of things, on music, on dance. At this time, we know that all of you will be familiar with Wajid Ali Shah, the kind of spectacles he put up. So because political power is taken away from them, they do keep, investing in this sort of culture. But the fact is, resistance continues in some way or the other. Now, a lot of my book talks of various resistances, like Chet Singh of Benares, like Bahu Begum, Nawab, how they create insurrection. So the British know that and why does, so when 1857 happens, Lucknow goes up in flame. I mean, all the Sipahis come here because many of them are from here. And, journalist P. Sainath has said that, the Sipahis, what were they basically? They were farmers. They were farmers turned into soldiers. So they were very aware of the extractive policy that had reduced the countryside to famine and ruin at this time. So they were ready to go up in flames at an instant, and the British knew that. And the resistance at Lucknow lasted for longer than it did in any colonized country against the British in the world. It goes on for almost 2 years with Hazrat Mahal in Nepal, who finally escapes to Nepal. Why? Because they have a history of standing up to the British, which is something that we have, really, we think it came out of the blue, 1857. It didn't. All of this was happening, in a different guise, but it was still happening.
What sort of stuff must have come out during the Warren Hastings
Yes.
impeachment? Quite a lot of, in spite of what you said
Yeah.
about destroyed, legacy documentation.
Yes, yes.
I mean, quite a lot of stuff must be available.
There is.
Begums of Howard, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, the way
Yeah.
Hastings handled.
The way he handled it, I mean, there's a lot of information still available. And Operation Legacy didn't only destroy, they also took back to England documents which were not to fall into sensitive hands, i.e. the Indians. So they were taken back to Britain and they lie till today hidden. So there has been a historian has written a book on the African Operation Legacy, the papers that came out of there. She's written a really amazing book on that side of it. And I'm trying to find out where the Indian papers are because no one has spoken of them. There are papers relating to India under Operation Legacy that were removed. So there are all those papers as well. In addition to that, we have lots of information on Hastings especially, is one of my most despised characters. I'm going to say this straight up. I know that he's considered not too bad compared to Robert Clive. He's a different sort of man, but he really, he is also driven by ambition in a very different manner. And he reacts to anybody standing up to him. So he's interesting because if somebody has a very good impression of him, if somebody is hospitable and courteous with him, then he's all charm, So Asafudollah is very courteous, he invites him to his court at one occasion and he's all charm, he loves him. But Bahu Begum, when she stands up to him, then it's like a tinderbox. His temper just goes in an instant and he writes the most violent letters. And we have the letters he writes to his wife, Marian Hastings. And over there, he's less curated than in the official documents, as one always is with one's wife. So there are many different sources that you can put together.
Very scholarly, right? Hastings is far more scholarly.
He's not only scholarly, he's also an Indophile. He is also interested in Indian art and paintings and the literature and language, all of those things, the Oriental Society. No doubt, absolutely no doubt. But underlying all of that is an insatiable greed and lust for the revenues and the money that he can make to send back to England. So both things are existing at the same time. It's a dichotomy, but as human beings are never black and white.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Can you